Yeah, because if you come up to Vancouver, there's no shortage of people speaking all kinds of different languages. We could get into a cab. If we hailed a cab, there's a 50% chance the driver is Punjabi and a 50% he's Iranian.
Oh.
Now, I've been learning Persian, so I can handle it. I don't know if you do Persian as well.
Too.
Okay, so Zabon and
Zabana
Farsi.
Farsi, man. Ham Zabana Farsi. Tamani Miko now.
Baladam, Yekam Gal Baladam. So, and of course, Chinese, there's no shortage of Chinese.
Oh, yeah. You guys have
And,
the Cantonese. I heard that Vancouver, well, not just Cantonese, but someone told me that I forgot the number. It was a crazy number for population.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, I mean, I would think that in Vancouver, it's got to be 35%
Wow,
Chinese.
okay.
Yeah, and that's all happened within the last 20 or 30 years. And it used to be mostly people from Hong Kong, so it was heavy to Cantonese. But now I think it's majority Mandarin speakers.
Okay.
Mainland China as well as Taiwanese
Oh.
origin people. But there's lots of everything. Certainly, I saw the Filipino flag on one of your videos.
Yeah.
So if you can do Tagalog, we can find you those.
Pretty much everything. We can do pretty much anything. Yeah. Like the only languages that I haven't really covered are what languages haven't I covered?
Have you done Ukrainian?
I haven't done any Ukrainian yet.
Yeah, I did. I learned Ukrainian. I went to Ukraine, a great country.
How was that? If you compare that to Russian, how?
Well, okay, Ukrainian is kind of between Russian and Polish. So the vocabulary is more similar to Polish, but certainly the writing system and perhaps the grammar is more similar to Russian. It's not very difficult if you're a Russian speaker. At first, you listen to Ukrainian, as a Russian speaker, and I felt I should be able to understand this language, but I don't really quite understand it. But then if you put some effort into learning the words, then it's slightly different. But I was, the interesting thing is that Russian, in terms of vocabulary, is the outlier. The vocabulary is closer between Polish, Czech, Ukrainian, and Russian vocabulary is somewhat different. But the grammar is very similar.
It's very similar. Okay.
And yeah, and it's a nice country, good food, and unfortunately they have a real problem right now. But I think their new president is good, and certainly it was a great country to visit. But everywhere.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What are your current what languages are you doing now? Like, what are your current active languages?
Okay, so I initially thought I would go after 3. So again, going by regions, right? So I got my East Asian thing, which is Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese, Korean to some extent, and of course I got my Western European languages, Romance languages, Spanish, French, Italian, and so forth. So I decided Middle East. Like I don't know enough about the Middle East, so I decided to go after. First, I went after Arabic. And then I said, well, I got the writing system, but there's so many Iranians here in Vancouver, so I should learn Persian. And then my wife was watching Turkish soap operas on Netflix, so I started in Turkish. But I dropped the Turkish for now because it's just too much for me to do them all at the same time. Turkish is in a way more difficult, but because it's written in the Latin alphabet, it's easier. And whereas reading, for me, like even though I kind of know what the writing system is, in fact, it takes a long time. I don't know how you handle all these different writing systems because the brain, you can theoretically know something, but you actually, I find you got to do it so much before it starts to feel comfortable.
I mean,
so,
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
So right now it's basically Persian and Arabic. I'm just working on the 2 of them. I get podcasts off the internet. I have people in one person, an Iranian gal who's actually traveling in India, and a woman in Jordan, and they transcribe them for me. And I listen to the podcast, understand about 20%, and then I go through the text on link and say words and phrases, and I'm just
So so you're doing Arabic, and so which one of those? Well, because I believe that Farsi for you shouldn't be a problem with your Japanese background because the grammar is the same. But what do you think is more?
Farsi is not. No, Farsi is Turkish in terms of the structure is more similar to Japanese. But Farsi is an Indo-European language, so it's very similar to other European languages. The word order, I mean, nothing there is very strange. Whereas Arabic is strange.
Arabic is strange,
right? And Turkish is stranger. Yeah. Yeah.
But so you learning
But
which form of Arabic are you learning? Fusha or?
just Fusha. Well, standard Arabic. I gather there's a difference between Fusha and standard Arabic, whatever you want to call it. The standard Arabic.
They're modern.
Okay. Yeah, because if I get on to Al Jazeera or France 24, or anywhere where they have Arabic, podcasts, political discussions, whatever, it's all in standard Arabic.
Okay.
Whether the person is from Sudan, from Algeria, from Lebanon, they speak the standard Arabic. I recognize that if I were to go and visit Lebanon or Egypt, I'd have to spend some time working on that form of the language. But right now I'm focused on standard Arabic.
Because that's the difficult part when it comes to learning Arabic. Because if you like to speak with people, I found it to be a bit difficult to try to level up using modern.
Very
because
different.
then when you talk with them using the modern, then they'll say, well, they'll make some comments and say, you sound like my teacher, or they'll laugh, and a lot of times they don't respond back, and when they do respond back, it's in their respective dialect, so
right. But I was in Montreal, and a lot of taxi drivers are Lebanese, and they did not respond in standard Arabic. On the other hand, there's a coffee shop in Vancouver where I can speak to them in standard Arabic, and my wife and I were in Morocco. And taxi drivers, restaurant owners, they were happy to speak to me in standard Arabic. Even though we could have spoken in French. Because that's,
right.
very common there. But they would humor me. They were very nice. I like it when people humor me, Not like that Chinese guy who was giving you a hard time
that
in
was,
that video.
Yeah,
He's the only person in all of the videos I looked of yours. He was the only guy who wasn't nice.
Yeah, that rarely happens. I tell my, I like to make, so when I have like a really uncomfortable situation, I think it's good for the viewers too, because see, they may have a similar situation and they may get discouraged and say, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Is this how the people act?" But they need to see. I tell people that you can't really expect every situation to be positive, but I would say 98% of the time, when you speak with people, you show them that you want to learn their language, they're going to be very, very happy, and they're going to be open, and they're going to be willing to practice with you. That situation with that Chinese guy, that was really something that rarely happens. Like I had, out of my whole experience,
but
I think I had 2 bad experiences with Chinese, 2.
Right.
And I've been doing languages for 20 years. So I mean, that's.
But you have like, not everyone can do what you do. Like you have it just bounces off you and you come back with a chuckle, and I mean, not everyone can do it, right? So you have a very good personality you come in with a chuckle before you've even said anything. You've already created a bit of a positive, happy mood and stuff. Not everyone can do that, and I think some people would get uptight if the people were annoyed and he was just a jerk, that guy. Like, he claims that he spoke Yiddish. He didn't speak Yiddish. And then he challenged you and you spoke to him in Russian. He says, that's not Russian. And then he told you your Chinese was no good. Like, he was just, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't take him seriously because I have too much experience. And, I mean, my Chinese is not perfect, but, No,
and I think that's another thing that I always mention you as an example. Like I had a discussion with a guy in Japanese who was all about pitch accent in Japanese and pursuing sort of the nth degree of perfection in Japanese. And I said, fine, like if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But that's not the only approach one can have to language learning. And I always point to you and say, here's a guy, he's dabbled in Estonian, in Khmer. Yeah, I think he did some Hmong at some point. Yeah, Swahili. Like, it's so he has sampled. Like, imagine you went to a buffet dinner and you sampled a little bit of everything that was at the table. I mean, you can also just grab a steak and sit down and eat the steak. But I think, and I'm the same way, like I have 20 languages. I would say that, maybe a handful I speak well. And then it just, it gets worse from there on, and I can't claim to speak. But I went to Greece and I spoke Greek, and I went to Romania and I spoke Romanian. And if you came at me now in Greek or Romanian, I don't think I'd be able to handle it. But so what? I had that experience. I discovered a little bit about Greek culture and a little bit about, I mean, I tried Vietnamese, but I didn't get very far. But So I think that's a tremendous thing to do, and you can't expect if a person, I don't know how many languages you're up to now, but you can't expect that a person who does 50 languages is going to be equally good in all of them.
Yeah,
it's
that's not realistic. It's not realistic. It's just, it's just, I tell people, people ask me all the time, well, I see that you're doing all these languages at the same time, but I will always tell people, if they're trying to get to a really high level in a language, like, C1 or C2, you can't do
right
5 or 6 languages at the same time. You have to really focus on that language itself, because that language is going to require your full attention. I always tell people, that. So it really all depends on the person. It depends on their goals or what they want to do. Like me,
Absolutely.
I love the new experience. I love the
Right.
new experience and new interaction with people. So I don't expect myself to learn all those languages to a crazy high level. So I go and say, look, I'm happy with A1. I'm happy with A2. I'm not going to spend all this time trying to get to like a C1 or whatever, So I set realistic goals for myself, but I tell people all the time,
Right.
I tell them, you need to make sure that, set your goals, ask yourself what you want out of this language. Why are you studying this language? And if it's going to be a really high level like that, unfortunately, you can't do multiple. I mean, you can, but the problem is going
Right.
to, the problem you're going to have is the attention. You over here doing this, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna do this for this time, and you over here, you can't really do that when you're trying to get a language to a high level. You have to really focus on that language, So it really all depends. I tell people that all the time.